Krakatoa, 1883. Before the world changed. August 27, 1883. A single volcanic eruption changed the world. An island disappeared. More than 36,000 people lost their lives. The explosion was so powerful that people thousands of kilometers away thought they were hearing distant cannon fire. Even today, it remains one of the loudest sounds ever recorded in human history. This is the story of Krakatoa. If you enjoy stories of history, tragedy, and real events that changed the world, welcome to Missing History. Let's uncover the past, one story at a time. Long before disaster struck, the Sunda Strait was one of the busiest waterways in Southeast Asia. Lying between Java and Sumatra, it connected the Indian Ocean to the Java Sea, making it a vital route for ships traveling between Europe, Asia, and Australia. Steamships crossed the strait daily. Fishing boats left before sunrise. Markets flourished along the coast. For generations, life here had depended on the sea. Near the center of the strait stood a small volcanic island called Krakatoa. To local communities, it was simply another mountain rising from the ocean. Few imagined that within months, most of the island would cease to exist. In May 1883, Krakatoa awakened. Without warning, a column of ash rose thousands of meters into the sky. Ships sailing nearby reported deep explosions echoing across the sea. Some returned to port, covered in volcanic ash. Others described a dark plume stretching high above the island. At first, the eruption did not cause widespread panic. Volcanoes were common throughout the Dutch East Indies, and most people believed this would be another routine eruption. Instead, the volcano grew stronger with each passing week. Ash drifted across nearby villages. Windows rattled. The ground trembled. At night, the summit glowed red, lighting the horizon like a giant furnace in the middle of the sea. News of the eruption spread quickly. Ship captains filed reports. Scientists traveled to observe it. Newspapers published regular updates. People knew the volcano was becoming more active. What they didn't know was how close it stood to catastrophe. In 1883, volcanology was still a young science. Researchers understood lava, ash, and volcanic explosions, but they did not yet know that an entire volcanic island could collapse into the sea and unleash massive tsunamis. The greatest danger was hidden far below the surface. Deep underground, magma continued to rise, while seawater slowly forced its way into cracks inside the volcano. No one could see the immense pressure building beneath the island, and no one realized that Krakatoa was approaching its final stage. By August, the countdown had already begun. The eruptions were becoming more frequent, more violent, and increasingly unpredictable. Every explosion brought the volcano closer to collapse. No one knew exactly when it would happen, only that something extraordinary was about to change the world forever. The volcano reaches its breaking point. By August 1883, Krakatoa was no longer awakening. It was unraveling. Each day, the eruptions grew more violent. Columns of ash rose higher into the atmosphere. Explosions echoed across the Sunda Strait from morning until night. The island seemed incapable of falling silent. Ships passing nearby encountered conditions unlike anything their crews had ever experienced. Ash drifted across the sea like gray snow. Visibility fell dramatically. Some captains changed course, unwilling to sail closer. Others continued, forced to navigate through darkness created by the volcano itself. Several crews reported another strange phenomenon. Lightning flashed repeatedly inside the towering ash cloud. Today, it is known as volcanic lightning. Electrical discharges generated as billions of ash particles collide inside the eruption column. To the sailors of 1883, it looked as though the sky itself was at war. One of the ships caught in the eruption was the British steamer SS Norham Castle. Its crew described thick volcanic ash covering the deck, air so heavy that breathing became difficult, and daylight fading into an eerie darkness. They believed they were witnessing an unusually large eruption. They had no idea the worst was still to come. While the world watched the eruption above ground, a far more dangerous process was unfolding below. Every explosion released magma from deep underground. As the magma chamber gradually emptied, it could no longer support the enormous weight of the volcano above. At the same time, seawater continued to seep into newly opened fractures where it met rock heated to more than 1000 degrees Celsius. The water instantly turned to steam, expanding with explosive force. Each eruption weakened the island. Each collapse created new fractures, and every fracture allowed even more seawater to enter. It became a chain reaction that could no longer be stopped. The people living nearby could hear the explosions. They could see the ash clouds. They could feel the ground shaking. But the greatest danger remained invisible. Deep beneath Krakatoa, the volcano was beginning to collapse from within. On the evening of August 26, 1883, everything changed. The intervals between explosions grew shorter until they almost disappeared. Ash poured into the atmosphere without pause. Darkness spread across the Sunda Strait from the shores of Java and Sumatra. People watched the distant volcano vanish inside an immense black cloud. Many believed the eruption had reached its peak. They were wrong. By sunrise, the pressure building beneath Krakatoa would finally be released, and the world was about to hear a sound it would never forget. The day the world heard Krakatoa, dawn broke on August 27, 1883. For those living along the shores of Java and Sumatra, it seemed like another morning beneath an volcano. But this day would become one of the most devastating in recorded history. At 5:30 a.m., Krakatoa unleashed its first massive explosion. A towering column of ash, rock, and volcanic gas shot high into the sky. The ground shook violently. Windows rattled across nearby towns. Only 44 minutes later, another explosion followed. Then the volcano fell briefly silent. It was the calm before catastrophe. At 10:02 a.m., Krakatoa erupted with unimaginable force. Millions of tons of rock, ash, gas, and magma were blasted into the atmosphere. The eruption column rose more than 30 kilometers above the earth. The explosion was so powerful that it shattered the summit of the volcano. Within moments, most of the island began collapsing into the sea. Then came the sound. It echoed across oceans and continents. People more than 3,000 kilometers away in Western Australia believed they were hearing distant artillery. On Rodriguez Island, nearly 4,800 kilometers from Krakatoa, residents reported hearing the same deafening blast. No sound in recorded history had ever traveled so far. Even today, it remains one of the loudest sounds ever documented. The shockwave raced outward through the atmosphere. Barometers around the world recorded a sudden jump in air pressure. The wave circled the Earth again and again and again, becoming one of the first global natural events ever measured by scientific instruments. But the explosion was only part of the disaster. As the magma chamber emptied, the enormous weight of the volcano could no longer be supported. A vast section of Krakatoa collapsed into the sea. An island that had stood for thousands of years was disappearing before human eyes. The sea erupted upward. Ash and superheated gas filled the sky. The ocean surrounding Krakatoa was thrown into chaos. Yet the greatest danger was no longer the volcano. It was the water. Billions of tons of seawater had just been displaced, and racing outward from the shattered island came a series of gigantic waves moving toward every coastline of the Sunda Strait. When the sea struck back, the collapse of Krakatoa lasted only minutes. Its consequences would last forever. As the volcano disappeared beneath the sea, billions of tons of seawater were forced outward. The ocean did not simply rise, it became a wall of destruction. Across the Sunda Strait, the tsunami raced toward the coastlines at the speed of a jet aircraft. There was no warning, no sirens, no emergency broadcasts, no evacuation plans, only minutes separated life from catastrophe. Along the shores of Java and Sumatra, many people had survived the volcanic ash. Some believed the eruption was finally ending. Then the sea began to retreat. Fishing boats settled onto the exposed seabed. Coral reefs emerged above the water. Curious villagers walked toward the shoreline, unaware they were witnessing nature's final warning. Moments later, the horizon disappeared. In its place stood a towering wall of water. Some waves rose more than 30 meters high. When they struck, entire villages vanished within minutes. Wooden houses were swept away. Stone buildings collapsed. Harbors, markets, mosques, and roads simply disappeared. Ships weighing thousands of tons were lifted inland like toys. Massive trees were torn from the ground. Everything standing in the path of the water was destroyed. Those who escaped the first wave often believed the danger had passed. But more waves followed again and again, each one sweeping away what little had survived before. When the sea finally grew calm, the coastline had been transformed. Entire communities had ceased to exist. Families searched desperately for loved ones who would never return. Many victims were never identified. Their names were lost with the sea. Official records estimated that more than 36,000 people lost their lives. Today, many historians believe the true number was even higher. Not because the records were wrong, but because countless coastal villages simply disappeared, leaving no one behind to count the dead. For the people of Indonesia, the disaster was over. For the rest of the world, its effects were only beginning. High above the earth, billions of tiny particles were already drifting through the atmosphere, preparing to change the skies and even the climate of an entire planet. The legacy of Krakatoa. The violence of Krakatoa lasted only hours. Its impact lasted for generations. The eruption hurled billions of tons of ash and sulfur-rich gases high into the atmosphere. Powerful winds carried them around the globe. Within weeks, the effects could be seen thousands of kilometers from Indonesia. Then, people began noticing something extraordinary. Sunsets looked different. Across Europe, North America, Africa, and Australia, the evening sky glowed with brilliant shades of crimson, purple, and gold. Artists captured the strange skies on canvas. Scientists searched for an explanation. Few realized they were witnessing the aftermath of Krakatoa. High above the earth, tiny volcanic particles scattered sunlight, creating some of the most spectacular sunsets ever recorded. But beauty came with consequences. The same particles reflected part of the sun's energy back into space, causing global temperatures to fall by about 1 degree Celsius. For a single eruption, the effect was extraordinary. Krakatoa proved that a single volcano could do more than destroy an island. It demonstrated that one eruption could alter the atmosphere, cool the global climate, and leave its mark across the world. But Krakatoa's legacy did not end with the eruption. It also transformed the way scientists studied volcanoes. The disaster revealed how closely Earth, the atmosphere, and the climate are connected. Many of the foundations of modern volcanology were built from the lessons learned in 1883. Most people believed the story ended there. It didn't. Deep beneath the Sunda Strait, magma continued to rise. In 1927, a new island began emerging from the sea. Scientists named it Anak Krakatoa, the child of Krakatoa. Year after year, it grew larger, a reminder that volcanoes never truly disappear, they simply change. Then, in 2018, history echoed once again. Part of Anak Krakatoa collapsed into the sea, triggering another tsunami that struck the surrounding coastline. Hundreds of people lost their lives. It was a sobering reminder that the forces which destroyed Krakatoa are still active today. If you visit the Sunda Strait now, you will never see the original Krakatoa. Most of it lies hidden beneath the sea, but its legacy remains everywhere. In the growing cone of Anak Krakatoa, in the science that forever changed our understanding of volcanoes, and in one astonishing fact, more than 140 years later, the explosion of August 27, 1883, is still remembered as one of the loudest sounds ever heard by humankind. Some disasters change a country, some change a generation, but only a few change the world. Krakatoa was one of them. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. If you enjoyed this documentary and would like to explore more remarkable stories from the past, please consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and joining us again for another journey into history. Until next time, this is Missing History. Thank you for watching.